Howdy folks, welcome back to another Out of Spec Renew video. Today we've got a 2018 Nissan Leaf here in the shop with a customer complaint of no heat. I've already looked into this a little bit and kind of determined what the failure mode is. So just to kind of explain what's going on here is this Leaf actually has two methods of heating. It has a heat pump and it also has a resistive PTC heater. In really cold temperatures, or if it's really humid and relatively cold, the heat pump does not tend to work very well. So it's not really super cold here in Portland right now, but it is cold enough and especially humid enough that it makes it so that the heat pump is basically ineffective, and the PTC heater is what's failed. So that's the actual resistive heater element. So we're going to go ahead and look into replacing the PTC heater, which I've looked at the codes and stuff, and it's definitely indicative of a PTC heater failure, which is pretty common. We'll go ahead and inspect it and confirm that that's the issue. The big concern here is that there's a possibility that the supply fuse that powers the PTC heater may have also blown if the PTC is shorted in this car. So it doesn't seem to happen super often, but it is kind of a known failure mode that sometimes that fuse can blow. And unfortunately, that fuse is located inside of the battery, which requires opening up the battery to replace the fuse. So fingers crossed that we don't have to do that. As far as the PTC heater itself, to actually replace the whole unit, the entire heater HVAC cassette has to be removed from the car, which requires disassembling the entire dashboard, removing the steering wheel, dropping the steering column out, evacuating the air conditioning system. However, I think that I might have a workaround to that I haven't actually tried yet, but based on a couple of the past ones of these that I've done, I think that what we can do is separate the actual resistor elements in the PTC heater from the portion that does the switching, which is the part that actually fails. So let me actually grab one of those real quick and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So this is actually our replacement PTC heater here. You can see it has a couple grounds and stuff cut off of it, but the main high voltage cable here is intact, which is the important thing. This is a used unit. These things new from Nissan are pretty pricey, but you can get used ones from auto dismantlers for a lot less expensive. Got to be real careful though. Usually you want to try and order one where they have pictures of it, because a lot of dismantlers will just chop the cables off and then it's unusable. I've dealt with that a number of times. But anyways, so my theory to replacing this is, rather than replacing the whole unit, the part that fails is actually only the switching unit in this end here, and the resistors are fine. So what I'm thinking that we can do is to pop this end off. So we've got that unsnapped, and then we should be able to unsnap this side as well. And of course, I busted the tab on that, which isn't so super awesome, but I think we're separated there. So now I should be able to separate the two halves. And this just has a bunch of spade connectors in it that connect to the actual resistor elements. So we can leave this part in the car, which should be fine. I'll probably go through and try and check all the resistance values. So each pair of these corresponds to a resistor element within the heater. So I'll probably go through, check all those, and make sure none of them are shorted. And we'll just replace this piece, which should require way less clearance, and we should be able to swap this in without having to take the entire dash apart. Saves us a lot of time, and it saves the customer quite a bit of money in terms of labor cost. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get the car taken apart so that we can access this thing. I'll go ahead and measure the old PTC heater and see what we've got going on, and then I'll check and make sure that our fuse in the battery is still intact. All right, as per usual, First step to doing any kind of work on the high voltage system, which of course we are when we're replacing that, is to disconnect the high voltage system. So we'll get our hood opened up here. Disconnect the 12 volt battery, which is looking pretty crusty if I'm honest. I'm betting that's original to the car, which being a 2018, that means that this is now basically a roughly 7-year-old 12 volt battery. So I might mention that to the customer. I might even put a load test on that and see how it tests. But it might not be a bad idea to replace that while we're here. Okay, there's our negative terminal disconnected. We'll go ahead and pop open the cover in the back seat and we'll remove the high voltage disconnect. All right, we'll go ahead and get this opened up. So we're just in the back seat here where we can disconnect our high voltage interlock, which goes in the top of the battery. So that panel there just pops off. And then there's a metal cover under here. It's got 3 screws in it. And then I'll grab our disconnect here. There we go. There's our disconnect removed. All right, we've got the car up in the air here. We'll go ahead and disconnect where our heater connects to the battery here underneath. And we'll go ahead and check to make sure our fuses are good. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this plastic panel. All right, we got our panel removed there. So we've got our connections on the high voltage battery here. I'm going to disconnect this bracket right here. And we're going to actually unplug both of the high voltage connectors so that we can check our fuse. All right, so we're going to check our continuity between our 2 positives and our 2 negatives. And if our fuse is intact, then we should have continuity between both sides there. And then, so our pack positive is going to be this right pin here, and that should correspond with the upper pin on our connector over here. Okay, so we've got continuity there. Then our pack negative. All right, so our fuse is intact, which is good. That means we won't have to drop the battery to complete this repair. And just for the record, these terminals are de-energized. Contactors are open and our high voltage disconnect is out, so we don't have any voltage present there. By the way, that fuse that I'm talking about for the heater is located right here. And you can see this cabling is from the heater port. This plug, all that it powers is just that cabin heater. And it's fused right there. So if the cabin heater shorts out, that fuse will blow. And of course, the battery has to be opened up in order to facilitate that. This is actually a project that I'm working on that's going to make it into a future video, so a little bit of a sneak peek. I won't give away too much on it, but it's got some modules out for some repairs, and you should see that one in the future. All right, so this next part's going to be next to impossible to film. I also skipped removing the plastic panels on the side of the kind of center console under the dash here, but it was pretty simple. This one just clips into place right under there. I think it's upside down, but anyway, it just clips into place. This one is the same way. It just clips into place down there, and it had one little push clip in the end there. But what we need to do now is remove the actual heater. So the heater is back here. These 2 lugs you can see are the ground cables, and then you can see the orange high voltage cable. We have to remove this metal sort of cover, bracket, whatever you want to call it. It's got some fasteners that we can get to pretty easily here, a couple back there. But there's also one that's hidden behind this plastic panel. I can get to it from the top with a tool, but it's a real tight squeeze in there to get to it. So, and I won't be able to film any of this because there's simply not enough space for me to work and film at the same time. So I'll just have to show you after the fact. The other thing we have to remove is this duct right here. So it's got a couple screws that also hold it in. I haven't ever done one of these on a Leaf that's this newer body style. Architecturally, they're all pretty much the same, but obviously there's differences. The interior is one of the areas where they made some pretty big updates. So the dash is actually quite a bit different. There's a lot more plastic here that's covering the areas that I need to get to. But yeah, the only thing that prevents this from being removable, if you took apart the whole plastic, upper part of the dash, is this leg that comes down on the dash structure. And that blocks the heater unit from being able to slide all the way out. So instead of being able to just remove just the upper, the dash panel, the entire metal structure of the dash also has to be removed in order to slide the heater all the way out. So that's what we're trying to avoid here, is a whole lot of labor associated with that. Sure would have been nice if Nissan would have just made this bracket removable with a couple of bolts, but it's all welded in place to this big tube up here. So that tube runs the length of the dash all the way across, and then it just has this leg that sticks down with a bracket for the plastic dashboard to attach to right down there, and then a couple other brackets to attach things to. Anyways, enough complaining. I'm just going to go ahead and get to it, remove the stuff that we need to remove, and then hopefully we'll be able to take off just the switching part of the heater and swap it out with that replacement. So I removed this sort of forward upper section of the center console, and while I don't have direct access to our high voltage harness, which you can kind of see back here, there we go, there's my fingers on it, I can at least grab down here where it goes through the floor if I stick my hand through this hole. So that way I'll be able to fish that harness out of there. Maybe you can see back here. If I stick that through there, or maybe not. In any case, now I can at least fish that cable through there, and I'll be able to get the new one pushed through where it needs to go. There's sort of a flap in the carpet here, and then that grommet has to push through the floor. But I think that I can get it out without removing the whole center console. If I do need to remove the whole center console, it's not that much more difficult. There's just a couple screws down here on either side that hold it in, probably some screws under the cup holders here. But yeah, anyway, I'll go ahead and try and get that harness fished through, and we'll try and get that heater removed. All right, update time. So the heater is now loose. I got the screws out of it, and there is indeed, I get the light down here where you can see, there is indeed just enough space where it can unclip from the end of that, which is exactly what I was hoping for. So I'm going to go ahead and unclip that on both sides, get this piece removed off the resistor element, and then we should be able to just swap over our replacement. So we've got our old heater unit out and our replacement ready to go back in. I went through and I checked the resistor element that's mounted in the car, and all of the 8 resistors in it all seem to be good. They all should be roughly somewhere in the 600 to 800 ohm range, but there's a little bit of variability there because they're a PTC resistor, so the resistance value can vary a bit based on temperature. But anyway, roughly between 600 to 800 or 900 ohms is about what each one should be. So I'm going to go ahead and get this unit back in. I'll swap over the grounds that we disconnected. Actually, I still need to take this short little one off of here and transfer it over. But then we should be able to get everything back together and see if our heat works. All right, so I'm getting ready to install the replacement heater in here. I did have to modify a couple things though to get the ground off. It's supposed to be taped on to the harness where this black piece of tape is. The other one I just pulled through, but I'll have to unwrap that tape and then put some new tape on there. And then there's also one of these clips that holds the harness in place right here where you can see the plastic a little bit compressed. I had to cut that clip off. It's an integrated clip with a zip tie attached to it. So I cut the zip tie off and then I just inserted just a regular off-the-shelf zip tie through it to reuse it. So anyway, I'll go ahead and reroute the ground cable and stuff in there, and then I'll snap that thing back onto the resistor element. All right, the heater is in there. I've got the high voltage cable routed, and I think I have the grommet pretty much lined up with the hole in the floor where it goes. I'll have to finish it from underneath. But pretty much all that's left to do is to get the bracket and our piece of HVAC conduit back in there. I also removed this little piece off camera. I don't know if I mentioned that before. But anyway, I'll just go ahead and get that stuff together. I'm not going to go too crazy with getting the whole interior and everything back together because I want to test it and make sure it works. So I'm just going to get everything back together enough to make sure everything's functional. So anyway, I'll go ahead and put our metal cover plate back on there, the HVAC conduit. I'll have to get the upper center console thing back on because that's got the power button and stuff. So yeah, I'll just get together what I need to, and we should be able to test this thing out. All right, I got all the stuff installed there for the heater, the metal cover, the ducting for the HVAC, and then I got our upper center console here reinstalled with the climate controls and all that stuff. This is just sitting here loose, but all the connectors are plugged in. All that's left to do is to plug in the high voltage connectors back on the battery. Then we can put our disconnect back in, power the car on, and check our heat for functionality. Car's back down. We'll get ready to power it up. Couldn't help but notice there's a bit of a bubble in this tire. I don't know how well it shows up on camera, but there's a lump right there. So I'll have to let the customer know about that. He must have hit a pothole or something. So, oh yeah, there you go. You can really see it pronounced there. So yeah, he's going to need a new tire to fix that. I'll have to let him know. Not something I do, though. I don't do tires, so he'll have to go to Les Schwab or Discount Tire or something. But anyway, let's go ahead and get this thing powered up. Grab our disconnect up here. It's kind of dark back here, but there's the disconnect inserted. Push it down. We'll get our 12-volt battery hooked up. I can tighten that down in a minute, but we should be able to power on. All right, so let's go heat, maybe. Oh, there we go, on, heat. Let's turn it up all the way. Oops, apparently I turned it off. Why can't I see my temperature? There we go. So we'll crank that all the way up. I'm going to change it to the upper vents here where I'll be able to feel it. And let's see if we get heat. Yep, I can already feel it warming up, which it wouldn't do before because it was kind of too cold and too humid for the heat pump to kick on, but there we go. Yeah, we definitely have resistive heat now. So that's all fixed. Sweet. Yeah, awesome. Cool. I'll set that to auto and I'll just turn it down to a normal temperature. 70 ought to work. Awesome. Well, now I can go ahead and get the glove box and everything else put back together. And then this thing should be good to go. Alrighty, well that wraps up this repair. We're all done. the heat works as it's supposed to, and this customer can get back on the road. Probably worth mentioning, I believe that the dealer quoted this guy somewhere north of about $3,500 to replace the PTC heater, which is pretty typical. That's about what the dealer would charge to do one of these on these cars. The part new, I think, retails for about $1,800, and then the book time to pull the whole dash and remove the HVAC module and everything, I think, is about 6.5 or 7 hours. So all that adds up to a really big repair bill. The dealer might even be charging more than that for their retail pricing on the part. I'm not sure. But anyway, I think the total bill that they quoted was about $3,500. But to put in that used component and to replace just the actual switching unit and not the whole heating element meant that we didn't have to pull the whole dash and everything. So it was a significant, labor savings to not replace the whole unit. And of course, I pass that savings along to my customers. In this case, it was about 2.5 hours of labor. And then the used part was much, much less expensive than one from the dealer. If I remember right off the top of my head, I think that the cost for the used unit is about $450. So all in with labor and the used part, they're, I think, just under $900 for the total repair versus, the $3,500 plus from the dealer. So about a quarter of the cost, or maybe just slightly over a quarter. There are a couple other things outstanding on this car. I did test the 12-volt battery, and it is in pretty sad shape. On a load test, it drops well into the weak category. Obviously, cranking amps isn't a concern for an EV, but if it's got if it tests poorly on a load test, usually means it doesn't have a lot of capacity left in it, and they tend to suffer in the cold too when they're in that kind of shape. So this 12-volt battery is on its last legs, which, given that it's now, roughly 7 years old, it's pushing the limits on how long they tend to last. And of course, our front right tire here needs to be addressed, so I'll let the customer know about that one as well. That one is something that it'll have to go someplace else to deal with, but anyways, that's it for this one. Hope you guys enjoyed watching, and if you like seeing this stuff, tune in for more repairs in the future.